Questions at the end, hey, okay. But if there's something burning that that's in the slide that you want to just comment on, you are welcome to do so. I don't like too formal. So today is fun for me because usually when you present at conferences and say the other academics are looking at your stats and are your figures right and what can they comment on and what is wrong. And today is really nice for me when I work with parents and with teachers as well. Not that you don't know what I'm talking about. I mean, you can know stats much more than I do. But really coming into what happens in the home with the issues that we are researching. So we are researching these big issues of maths development or child cognition or learning difficulties or attentional difficulties. But what happens in your home or in your classroom? I just want to see with a show of hands, are there teachers here or is it just, okay, great. So I'll speak across the board. So parents are teachers anyway, so let's look today a little bit at attentional difficulties. I think it's one of the main issues that we're sitting with in the classroom. Certainly you that are teachers know. And parents at home also often ask me when I work in my practice work, is it okay if I walk around? Because I can't, I have to move. I've also got this, so. So parents often ask me, what is going on that all of a sudden everyone's diagnosed with attentional difficulties? What has happened? When we were young, certainly when I was young, no kid had attentional difficulties. They got a good hiding if they couldn't sit still in class. And I sometimes think, if I think of some of those, especially, unfortunately, boys are the more hyperactive ones. In my class, I think some of them might as well in the mornings just come in for their hiding for the day already because they got a hiding every single day. And I'm sure some of them really had attentional difficulties, and that's why they couldn't sit still and focus. So let's look a little bit today at this. We hope this clicker is going to work with me. Okay, it doesn't seem to be. Can you just quickly check? I'll talk until I'll keep on clicking. So let's just step back a bit. Many people also ask, if there are attentional difficulties and children have attentional difficulties, is it my fault as a parent that my child has attentional difficulties? Because that is often, and I often see the fear on parents' faces when I do an assessment with their children and I give them the feedback and I say, look, we do pick up some attentional issues. And they often want to know, is it something I did wrong? Is it something in my parenting? Is it something along the way as a parent I neglected to do? Or is it something unhealthy that I did? And I want us to unpack that as well today, to see whether it is just in terms of parenting style, or whether there's something more like genetics, or whether there is something more even in the environment and our lifestyle, because it's got a huge, huge influence, and unfortunately schooling as well. I'm just going to go on until you get my slides. I'll talk in general. Okay, so it seems to be there, but not there, so we'll fix it now. So the problem is, and this is an issue I just want to in general address, is the idea of schooling. Schooling is definitely been developed for the industrial era. You know, churn in, churn out a certain workforce. So everybody comes into the class, does the same thing, everybody goes out. Where these days, what does life ask us? It asks of us to be entrepreneurial. We must be fast thinking, innovative. And those are all the things in your class that you want, that normally gets the teachers, makes it very difficult for them to teach the curriculum that they're supposed to be teaching. Because this is not what the curriculum is telling them to do. They have to get through a certain work. Doesn't matter if some kids can do it faster or slower. And it's really difficult for teachers to manage that in the classroom. The reason why I know this is because I train teachers and educational psychologists. So I work with teachers all the time. I was a teacher for 12 years. So I know the parent side and the teacher side. And usually people see it as these two opposites. You know, it's like parents versus teachers for this child in the middle. But it's actually not. People are working together. And parents have this idea that teachers just want to put the kids on tablets to keep them quiet. And teachers have this idea that parents don't hear what I'm talking to them, what I'm telling them, if they could only see their little child in the classroom. But I think the middle problem, which unfortunately is a very big problem that we are trying in academia to address in a certain way with research, is the whole issue of education. Education needs to change and the way we educate our children. So, okay, let's see if we can move on. Still not. Okay, I'm going to talk to one slide the whole day. You're going to just do it for me. It worked perfectly before, but it's fine. You know, I've come to conferences and then there's just nothing. And for the whole 2 hours, I have to entertain the people in the front. So let's see how we go. Okay, so is ADHD a label? Let's talk about that. Who of you know what ADHD means? Kenton? And hyperactivity with the H, hey? Why would you say it's a label? Ma'am, I saw you said that it's a label. Why would you think it's a label? And putting the stamp on the child. Yes. Yeah. Yes, yes. So, and often also have you realized, I don't know who of you maybe have children with attentional difficulties, often once your child has that stamp on their forehead, every teacher the next year, oh, you know what, that child's got attentional difficulties. Oh, that one with the attentional difficulties, it kind of gets passed on. And once again, I'm not blaming teachers. Like I said, I was a teacher. I'm always on teachers' sides. It's really hard if you have 45 little ones in your class and they're like little bubbles up and down to keep them all busy. It's not easy. But also, we must watch out because we label children and then we take away that actually the potential that they have. So now we put just that label on them and everything they do, we put into that label. Do you know in the 1960s, before ethical research was very like strictly protected children in research, etc., they gave a teacher a class and they told her that the kids in her class are all have a superior IQ. Okay, so they gave her 30 kids in a class, it was in US, maybe 25, and they said they are highly intelligent children. But all the children had average IQs, so they lied to her. And she worked with them for a term, and she got the most brilliant results out of them because she expected them to be super clever. And they ended up being super clever. So often we teach to the label that's on the child, and this is very sad because we don't see the potential behind it. But as I said, as a teacher also, you have these kids in your class that you have to deal with, and especially in South Africa, an exceptionally fast curriculum that you have to get through in the primary school, which is ridiculous. The child doesn't even know 6, then they must know 7, then they must know, and we'll talk about that later in terms of the maths. So let's just look a little bit at the general definitions of ADHD. I'm sure you know certain symptoms of ADHD and ADD. And before we used to talk about attention deficit disorder. Now it's attention deficit hyperactivity disorder, and it's either with hyperactivity or without. So what happens usually to children in a classroom? Let's start with a classroom if they have this kind of disorder. Any ideas? Disruptive? They can't focus? Yeah, they can't sit still. They shout out, teacher, teacher, teacher. And when the teacher says yes, I forgot what I wanted to say. You know, that's typically your type of child. Also with friends comes the difficulty because what they will do, they'll push friends and they don't even know. And then it's like, teacher, but he was mean to me. No, but you pushed him first. No, I didn't. So they often don't realize how they act as well. And then at home, it will be the kind of child that you'll say, quickly go fetch mommy a tissue in the bedroom. And 10 minutes later, you're like, where are you? And you're there, they're sitting in the bedroom playing with something else. Totally forgot that they had to go fetch a tissue. But is it only kids? Aha. This is where the question comes in. Hey. So many parents I see that I work with, when I work with them and I give a feedback, I would see 100% where some of these symptoms would come from. Because, and it's very funny because I definitely am a bit hyperactive, so that's fine. I'm not blaming anyone. But the thing is, often this behavior is learned a little bit from parents, but it also is quite hereditary, which we will talk about. What happens though with adults later on in life that have attentional difficulties, because it doesn't go away? Okay, you learn to handle it more, okay? You kind of get a secretary that whips you into place or whatever, or tells you what to do. or a husband, like my husband. He structures my life, and then I know what I need to do. Or you get maybe, you learn to keep a diary, and there are different ways in which we support ourselves when we're adults, when we're a little bit unfocused. Okay, but unfortunately with children in the classroom, they don't have those skills yet. And let's see how we can help them. So this is typically, I thought this was so cute. This is an ADHD child in the class. ADHD makes it hard for me to focus, and focus sounds like hocus pocus, and I really like magic a whole lot, abracadabra. And this is what you will see with kids with attentional difficulty. You talk about something, and then they're like, they're right on the other side. They pick up on a word, and they're gone. Okay, and so let's look at what are the types of ADHD. So we get 3 different types. We get inattention, but there's also a mixture of the 3. So you get inattention, get hyperactivity, and you get impulsivity. And I'm sure, Pastor Chuck, I see people are making notes. We can put this on the website, the PowerPoint. Is that okay? You can do that? Okay, so you're welcome to put that. We'll send it to you. So often children have a combination of these 3. They're not necessarily only just one single one. So they're not just impulsive or just hyperactive or just inattentive. Although not all children are hyperactive. And this is where so let's quickly look at inattention. So inattention, that part of of attentional difficulties is a kind of child that sits and daydreams sometimes, make notes, answer a test, skip a question, or read the first part of the question, forget about the rest of the question, answer that part of the question, and then they're usually very surprised when they don't do well in a test. It's like, but I knew that. And it also makes them very disillusioned with their own, especially when they grow up, because they start realizing, because the one thing that I haven't said, children with attentional difficulties are always intelligent. Okay, it goes with high IQ. Okay, the 2 go together. So often these children become despondent because they're like, but I knew my work, why don't I do well? And then they start getting other kinds of behaviors to make up for feeling insecure and feeling not good enough. So if you speak to teachers, you will often see, especially, and I'm not just focusing on the boys, girls are the more inattentive ones. So they'll be the ones that tend to go into daydreaming and drawing pictures. And teacher, look at my beautiful picture, but they're not focused on the maths lesson. Whereas boys will become the class clowns. Okay, to try and hide that they can't do this. So rather let the kids laugh at me and the jokes I make than think I'm stupid. And and later on, many children with inattentive type of ADHD and attentional difficulties are the kind of kids that become depressed and withdrawn. So like the kind of emo children, you know what I call, I don't know if emo kids are still a in thing, but it used to be a few years ago. But you know, the kids that are more withdrawn, they're socially not so interactive, and they become more drawn into their own world. Then, of course, we get hyperactivity. This is so easy to see because it's the kids that bounce around in the class and teacher and whatever. They're forever in your face. So you tend to spend more time on those kids with attentional difficulties than the ones that have inattention. Because the inattentive ones sitting there quietly drawing and they're not bothering you. So you tend to leave them. Whereas these other ones are the ones that sit at the teacher's desk and you tend to want to keep them quiet and busy. Okay, and then you get impulsivity. And this is the learner that shouts out in class. This is the kind of child at home that will just run. You'll buy a jungle gym, and before you see it, he's at the top of the jungle gym, and he doesn't know how to get down. Okay? They're just like wild, you know, so it's a bit wild. And this is usually children, these are children that are so enthusiastic. They want to please teacher, and they want to do stuff. And it's so sad for me always when I work with grade R kids, like little ones, and you come in the classroom or you talk to them, who's the strongest in the house? Me. Who's the fastest? Me. Who's the most beautiful? Me. And then you work later on, I'll work with maybe kids with learning difficulties in grade 3, 4, and I'll say, who's the strongest in your house? My brother. Who's the most clever in the class? That one. And you can see they've already scaled themselves down. And it's so sad. Place themselves in a different order. then thinking I'm the best and I'm good. So that self-image has already gone down, and it's sad for me because it shouldn't be like that. Now let's look at some of the symptoms just in terms of a new idea on attentional difficulties, and it's called sluggish cognitive tempo. And this is almost the opposite of ADHD. This is the kind of child that's totally lethargic, that lies on the arm like this in the class and writes. Every time you give them something, oh, teacher, I don't feel like this now. Or at home, if you ask them to do something to do, oh, mom, they just want to lie in front of the TV, etc. So it's almost like the opposite of the hyperactivity in terms of this kind of behavior. And what is the problem with children that have this form of the disorder is that they struggle with working memory. So in the class, when teacher gives instructions, they often confuse instructions and they don't know how to follow through, or they will work exceptionally slowly. So this is the kind of child that teacher will often keep in during break to complete their work. Or you sit and do homework with them and they take forever to complete their homework. And this is very important that we understand that this is also a form of attentional difficulty. It's not just that your child's lazy or tired. Okay, so... and then, of course, the problem often goes into adolescence. ADHD doesn't go away. Okay, it goes in, like we said before, you just learn to handle it more. But many adolescents actually go into adolescenthood with the disorder, and it's never been treated. So a big thing with adolescents with ADHD is low self-esteem, because they feel they're not good enough, they're stupid, they can't, I'm a loser anyway. And you know, kids are extremely cruel in the class. I used to teach matrics. So on high school kids, grade 9s, they say, why did Abram, why did he want to sacrifice, what was his son Isaac? Hey, because he was grade 9. So he was that age. So that's the age you want to sacrifice your kids. I'm just joking. Okay, woo, now it's on camera. Anyway, don't sacrifice your kids. Okay, but grade 9s are usually very hard to work with. They're that age where they're neither kid anymore, they're not adult anymore, you know. And they challenge you in the classroom, but that's the age where they're most vulnerable. And they're so cruel to one another. They will say to you, ach, you loser, you never know, you stupid. They'll say things like that to one another in the class. And the next time we were going to work on a parenting workshop, we're going to work on this whole idea of social media and dissing and isolating kids, etc. And this is really an issue in adolescence. And a lot of children become very withdrawn, especially children with attentional difficulties, because they lose their belief in themselves. And they also are more prone to be addicted to forms of substances. So many people say, I don't want to put my kids on Ritalin because I heard when you go on Ritalin, children in adolescence are more prone to become drug abusers. It's not true. It's the ADHD that's the root of that, not the Ritalin. Okay, because children with attentional difficulties, because of low self-esteem, tend to go into drug abuse and substance abuse. Okay. And then often what you see, this idea of procrastination and last-minute rush tasks, you see a lot with adolescents, and you see that with adults as well. Adults that can work very well and then procrastinate till the night before and have to work through the night with a project. That's that kind of thing. I think we all have a little bit of it in us, but it depends how well you can regulate it or not. Okay, let's look at ADHD in the brain. The prefrontal lobe is the front part of our brain, is the part that works with our executive functioning. Now, executive functioning helps you to plan your day, tell yourself, you know what, don't look at your WhatsApp messages now or your email, finish what you're writing with, or no, I can't watch my series now, I have to finish my project, then I can watch my series. So it's the part of this, they call it the CEO of the brain, that controls the brain and controls what you need to do in the brain. And children with attentional difficulties often struggle with this executive functioning in the prefrontal lobe. So they tend to be more, because they're impulsive, do the stuff I want to do as opposed as the things that I need to do. Also, organization is a problem. At my desk where I need to work or in my room, it's usually chaos all over the place for a child with attentional difficulties. On their desk, they often lose their things and and falls down, and then my pencil is gone. Now teacher told me what to do, but I must first look for my pencil. By the time I found my pencil, I've forgotten what I needed to do. You see, and it's so, and they feel so, and then I start looking at Johnny next to me. What is it I'm supposed to do? And then teacher shouts, stop talking to your friend. You see the whole thing it creates, and it's all with that, with the executive functioning. Okay, so brain chemicals, I'm not going to go into this too much, but brain chemicals called dopamine, there's a lot of information on the internet on this, are the ones that actually they've isolated now and see that either the dopamine is not transferred from the one neuron to the other enough or fast enough to be absorbed to carry the message across the synaptic space, or there's a blocking in terms of the dopamine. So either it's too slow, or it's blocked, or another one, okay, I'm going to explain it in a type of a simplistic way. This is the way I first understood it. So it's a very nice way to understand it. In the brain, there are certain things called reuptakers. Now here, I don't know if you can see nicely, is a neuron. And here's the other neuron. So messages get passed from the one neuron to the other one, from this one to the other one, on. Now between the two, in that synaptic space, there are little, for the lack of a better word, vacuum cleaners. So a message is passed across the synaptic space, and before the next message can get passed, these little vacuum cleaners, they're called reuptakers, have to suck the unused message back to clean the synaptic space for the next message to go across. So it's like, let's release, okay, they got the message, let's clean up, let's release, and that is regulated by dopamine. Now, what happens with children with ADHD, they have too many of these reuptakers, these vacuum cleaners. So before the message gets passed across, it's sucked back. So go fetch mommy a tissue. What was I supposed to do again? Okay, so there's too many of those reuptakers. So what Ritalin does, I'll show you later, it blocks. It's a reuptake inhibitor, so it blocks some of the reuptakers that the message can get passed across. But if you give it to a child that doesn't need it, it goes and blocks the normal amount of reuptakers, and then that synaptic space is full of message all the time that's not cleaned up. So you see how important it is that you diagnose it right, that you don't just go to your GP and say, and I'm not anything against GPs, both my brothers are GPs, so it's got nothing to do with that, but many parents say, I'm so tired, I can't deal with this anymore, give me Ritalin for my child. And the guy doesn't even ever see the child, understand? It's more for the parent. So that is very important that it gets given to the correct people. And we'll talk about the medication a little bit more, because I think my main question that I get from parents is medication good or bad for my child? And there's not one clear-cut answer. Okay, so there's dopamine. It's basically what I explained to you now, that it's a communicator across the synaptic space. Okay, now let's look at prevalence. Prevalence, how many children and people actually have ADHD? Is it such a big thing? Okay, now obviously we don't have a lot of research on it in South Africa, but we tend to see that more or less the research that we see elsewhere in the world, we see the same type of figures here. Definitely 7.5 to 15% of children have ADHD. Okay? Why with such a wide range? It depends on countries. Which country would you guess has the highest rate of ADHD in the world? Everybody would think America. It's the Netherlands, actually. Interesting enough. No idea why. Okay, so in the Netherlands, maybe children are just more diagnosed. That might be because this works on diagnosis. Okay, on figures of diagnosis. So children in America are about 7.2, 7.5%, but up to 15% in the Netherlands. Okay, I also think that many children are diagnosed. I certainly see that in my practice. Parents come to me and say, well, my child's been diagnosed with ADHD, and then they're like, no, when I do an assessment, it's actually not ADHD, it's something else. So many children are misdiagnosed. That also happens often. Okay. And then boys definitely more than girls in a ratio 3-to-1. Okay, it is a disorder that just tends to be more prevalent in boys. And then boys are more hyperactive and the girls are the more hypoactive ones. And there it just shows you into adulthood. So there's children, and of course it goes down into adulthood, but you can see the ratio between men and women stay more or less the same. Okay. Then, what are the causes? So many people, like we said in the beginning, what are the things that actually cause this? Is it inherent? What happened? So because ADHD symptoms, inattention, impulsivity, etc., affect a child's ability to learn and get along with others, some people think this is caused because of lack of discipline, a chaotic family life, or even too much TV. Okay, and I kind of like this meme. It said, sorry to disappoint you, but I can't spank the ADHD out of my child any more than I can slap the ignorance out of you. And this is so true, because I have worked with parents from different, it's so interesting when I speak to colleagues overseas. They have a kind of uniform, homogeneous kind of client they work with. And we have such a wide range of people that we work with here. And I always say to parents, I can identify with certain cultures because I come from a staunch Afrikaans-German culture. You can't get worse than Afrikaans and German together in terms of strictness. It's like, you're putting Hitler and Eugene Terblans together. Anyway. I'm just joking, okay? Anyway. And I'm married to an Indian, so I understand Indian culture very well, okay? But what I see, I'm joking now. What I do see, though, is that parents think, you know what, my child just needs a good hiding. Teacher, just give him the good hiding, he'll be fine. Or I'm just going to take him home and give him a good hiding, and then he'll be fine. I've even worked with kids where I've assessed the children for the parents, and I give them the whole report and everything, and then the next week the school phones me and say, you know what, the child came to school with a blue bum because the parent gave him a hell of a hiding and said he needs to pull himself together. After all of that explanation that the child can't help themselves. They're not doing it on purpose. But 10 to 1, the father has also got attentional difficulties, and he's also impulsive, and that's why he does it. Okay, which I'll show you. Yeah, unfortunately. In fact, research suggests that ADHD is largely genetic. Okay, and that also there are some environmental factors that do play a role. Very important. And coming back to how I started with, why all of a sudden do we have so many kids with ADHD? And it's definitely our environment as well, okay, apart from schooling. So there's just to show that it's not one thing that causes it. It's definitely a combination of quite a few things. Okay, let's look. We have dealt with the first one now that talks about neuroanatomics, so biologically what happens in the brain. Okay, now let's look at genetics. I want you to quickly think. Okay, it's a little bit difficult now because I don't know who of you have children with attentional difficulties. But I want you to quickly think about yourself and just discuss quickly with the person next to you some aspect or symptom of ADHD that I've mentioned today that you might think you might have. Just for 1 minute. Just to break the discussion a bit. Let's quickly talk. Okay, so I know I don't give you a lot of time to discuss, but we need to get through the things I wanted to talk to about. So genetics, often when I talk to parents and I give them the things that I've observed in their children's assessment, I often ask them which one of the two parents this talks to. And you always see that a parent identifies themselves in some of the things. Or a parent will say to me, you know, when I was at school, I never knew that this is actually what I had, but this has happened to me in the class as well. I also struggled, or the teacher was always fighting with me, or something happened, and they actually realized that. And I think that's where the kind of like in Afrikaans, I don't know, I'm trying to find the English word for it. Sometimes my home language just comes in. Die teerpunt. the point of so much vulnerability lies with your child, because your child is the most precious thing in your life. Your child is your future. The child is who doesn't think their kids are wonderful? You have to think your kids are wonderful. I always tell my daughters how beautiful they are, and they're like, yeah, Mom, it's because you're our mom. No, you have to tell your children how wonderful and beautiful they are. So if you think they're not wonderful, what chance do they have in life? You're the first person that should tell them how great they are. But what often happens in terms of genetics, we start realizing that our kids are going through the same battles that we fought, maybe at school. And that makes us very vulnerable. And I often work with very high-profile clients. I worked with just in his example, but there are many, a little boy that his father is CEO of a major company in the logos are all over the world. We know it very well. I just can't tell you which one, obviously, because of confidentiality. But and when I started saying the things that the child's struggling with, the father became very defensive, because he said, because I'm putting my child in the best school, I'm doing this and this and this and this, now you're telling me my child's still going to suffer through what I suffered through when I was at school. And so it brings up your own vulnerability, that hereditary issue often. And I always say to parents, look at it as a celebration. How did you overcome? If you're the CEO of Badada, wow, what did you do? You obviously overcame it. How can you help your child? And that's the messages that we need to speak up about. Not hide it that I had it. I had it, but look at me now. And how can I help my child to get there? So genetics not something to be ashamed about. And I've also had parents that the mom would burst out into tears, because it tends to be single gender genetics, okay? If the daughters have it, the mom tends to have it. If the sons have it, the dad tends to have it, okay? So, or the dad gives it to the son, moms to daughters. And I've had a mom burst out into tears and say to me, okay, so it's my fault my daughter's struggling at school. And I said, but it's not your fault. You were born like this. She's born like this. There's so much hope. Okay, but I think we fall into the darkness, instead of looking at the hope. There's so much hope. So genetics is not bad. Yes, genetics, you also gave your child beautiful eyes and a wonderful smile and everything else. So celebrate that. Okay, I'm preaching. That's Pastor Chuck's chance, not mine. Okay, then big problem is pesticides in the food that we eat. Huge issue. It interferes with the dopamine production in the brain. Okay, and we often think, and that's why I put the apple there, that we eat healthy food. You're giving your child apples, whatever. But in the rind, in the skin of the apple, they've found now that in cucumbers, you should peel cucumbers. And everybody's like, yeah, but the roughage is wonderful for you. But actually, the pesticides that they use go and sit in the skin, okay, of whatever you're eating. And it's so hard, because you think, okay, let's buy organic, which is so much more expensive, except for at Woolworths, the organic bananas are cheaper than the others, but okay, but organic food is expensive to buy, okay, and is it really organic? Because my husband's very interested in farming, and he's done a lot of things with aquaponics and looking into it and whatever. And if people are allowed to say it's organic, it's still got pesticides in it. It just means at a certain stage they had to stop the pesticides. Okay. So it's very, very interesting. So unless you grow it in your own backyard, then you don't really have control over that. Okay. So pesticides is one of the huge issues that we are sitting with. Okay. Next one is lead exposure. Now, mostly lead exposure has been eliminated. You know, they used to make fridges with lead linings and things like that. That's all stopped now. But they do say that there is still some lead in the atmosphere and in the air, and it is still out there, and it really interferes with the dopamine production and transference in the brain. Children with ADHD has higher levels of lead in their blood than children without ADHD. Okay, so it links directly to that. Okay, then food additives. And this is a big one, because it's not necessarily the sugar. We'll talk about the sugar now. It's the type of sugar and the colorants that go with the sugar. And of course, companies make sweeties beautiful because we eat with our eyes. We all eat with our eyes, you know, and so your child's like, I want that one, the brightest one with the most colorant in. And this Mazimba, I tried to get a picture of Mazimba, but I couldn't find. You know these big bags, I always make fun of my students at UJ with their Mazimba in the class. These big bags of corn chips. So bad, full of MSG, full of colorants, exceptionally bad for your child's brain. Okay? Which is really hard because we all love it and you get addicted to it. And if you start the bag, you can't stop. But there's a reason why, because of the MSG. Because it opens your taste buds. That's why all takeaways taste better. Okay? Because it actually opens the taste bud and it absorbs the flavor more. So it's not that it tastes more. It tastes better. It's just that your body thinks it tastes better because it enhances the experience. Hectic, eh? Yeah. So if you put MSG on your normal plate of food, you'll see it tastes amazing. Zeal? Okay. Yeah. So it's very interesting. Okay. So food additives definitely has an influence on it. Sugar. Now, we all think, yes, sugar, the bad one. You know, parents, teachers always say, don't give children sugar before second break. And it's not good. I'm not saying you must feed your child sugar. Not at all. Studies show that, especially they did a study recently in Australia where they looked at adolescents and they saw the higher their diet was in unhealthy fats and sugar, the more they were prone to ADHD symptoms. So refined sugar, of course, is bad, but it's not the only problem. And they actually did a study where they worked with children, I think it was in North Carolina, and they told the moms that they're giving kids sugar. So they gave some kids placebos, you know, placebo, like fake whatever, the pill or the tablet or the sweetie or whatever, and the other one's sugar. And then they said they had to say afterwards, were the children more hyperactive or not? And there was no difference between the reports from the placebo and the sugar. The moms that were told that their kids got sugar expected their kids to be more hyperactive, so they said they were more hyperactive, but they weren't necessarily. So sugar in itself is not bad. Of course, you mustn't give your child too much refined sugar. But you get some moms, their children are never allowed to eat a sweet or sugar or anything. I know my daughter had a friend like that, and every time she came to a party, she used to stuff her face because she was so hungry, you know, for sugar. And if she would come to your house, are we getting sweeties today? So there's also other things that you create with that. So always try and keep the balance. It's the same with TV. Some people don't let their kids watch TV, and then they can't wait to get to another child's house to watch TV. You know, so you must always get like a balance, you know. And then too much screen time. We will talk about the dangers of screen time next time to your brain in the next seminar on the 7th of July. But there are definitely influences on children's brain in terms of screen time, especially if there's too much screen time before the age of 5. Before the age of 2, just as a teaser, no screen time. It interferes with the way your brain develops. Anyway, okay, let's continue. The issue is not so much the TV or the screen, but how much the child spends in front of it. And also how they spend in front of it. How many times have I seen my kids lie upside down watching TV? Now you can imagine what happens to your brain. You know that if you watch an image, your brain actually reverses the image. Your eye sees it upside down and your brain turns it right way up. Okay? Now if you are lying upside down, your brain has to do it twice. Because now you're seeing it right way up to turn it upside down to turn it right way up. You can see how bad that is for the child's brain. So we're lying in front of the TV, and also TV, I'm not going to talk more about TV. And it interferes with children's interests, such as books, etc. That's something that helps the executive functioning and their focus later on. So TV does have an influence, and especially violent programs. Okay, and then bad parenting. Yes, bad parenting is not the only issue, but it does have an influence. I have worked with children where you actually can't, I actually sometimes think I need to give the parents therapy and not the kids. Or I need to test the kids. I had a little boy that I tested once, and the mom came with him. And the first thing he did when he walked into my practice, he picked up a toy and he threw it at me. And I said, no, you don't do this here. But now I also don't want to be too rude in front of the parents, you know. And then by the second time he did it, I actually took his hand. I said, no. And then the mom said, no, she'll let him come with the dad next time. The dad's much stricter. So when he came with the dad next time, the first thing he did, he turned around and he kicked the dad right in his shin. And he said, you stupid, I hate you. And he's 5 years old. If you're going to let your child do that when they're 5, what are they going to do to you when they're 15? When they'd want to do that anyway, it doesn't matter how nicely you raise them. I've had 3 teenagers, I know. Okay, so it's very, very important that you also do keep to boundaries as parents. We, especially with westernized ways of thinking, we often think that we must mollycoddle our kids. We must be the super parent, the super cool parent, the super this parent. Sometimes you mustn't be the cool parent. Sometimes, sorry, no. You don't always have to be popular. And I think that sometimes with these fluid boundaries, you can ask any teacher in class. The quickest way she has chaos in her class is if she doesn't have class rules. Okay, and the same thing at home. You have to have certain rules because it actually confuses children, and children with attentional difficulties become more confused because they need those specific boundaries. Okay, and then traumatic brain injury. Of course, this is not often, but children do, especially if they get bad concussion to their heads or bumps, they do develop some symptoms of ADHD. And then hazardous chemicals. Now, the first thing that comes to mind if we think of hazardous chemicals, we think a ship in the ocean with oil or some buckets they're dumping on an island. Okay, but it's not true. It's all around us. The PVCSs, one of those long words, okay? But where will you see it? Bottles, plastic wrapping. They've now found that one of the most dangerous things for you to eat is microwave popcorn because of the filming inside the popcorn that's heated up by the radiation or the waves of the microwave. Takeaway containers, okay? Plastic wrappers. All these sweeties that you eat, the plastic wrappers, if they have been in the sun for a certain amount of time, in the back of a truck or whatever, they actually become toxic. And it delivers toxins into your child's system. So but now what do? Child must drink out of a glass bottle. Then they break the glass and cut themselves. So it's not always easy, hey? But you do get the thicker glass bottles, the plastic that you buy specifically that doesn't do the breakdown now. So don't just take an old Energade bottle and put water in it and send your child to school. Very, very dangerous for them to drink out of old bottles, and especially energy drinks. They were made for endurance athletes, not for kids. Okay, and then most problematic, often we see, obviously, ADHD in the classroom. That's the place where it's externalized. Because at home, you're more fluid, and you tell them 3 times to go get dressed or bathed, but they don't have to come and show you how they bathed, or show their homework, or tell you that they understand whatever problem in maths you taught them. So parents don't often realize that their kids have attentional difficulties, but you see it more in class. And but often it's also bad teaching. I'm not just saying, okay, that it's never the teacher's fault. Because when I teach my students, I say to them, if you see a teacher that says, I've told this child 5 times and they still don't listen, obviously telling them is not working. You must do something else. Okay? And it's the toughest job in the world is a teacher. Okay, now I mustn't start talking about that. In Finland, the second highest paid job in the country is a foundation phase teacher. Students, I've spoken to students there that say to me, I didn't get in this year, so I'm doing pre-med until I can get in to foundation phase teaching. Wow. It's more important for them than becoming a doctor or any one of the other prestigious lawyer, whatever we see as prestigious. And that's why Finland's got the best education system in the world. Hey, they beat the Singaporean kids lights out on all the tests, world tests. Okay, and they don't go to school until they're 7. Don't put your child into grade 1 too early. Okay, well, I'm not talking more about that now. Okay, and then friends. Friends is usually the place where you see. If you have a child that constantly comes home, Mommy, they're being mean to me. That one the kids always say, they're being rude to me. This one did this to me. I don't have a friend. They're bullying me. And it's not to say that kids aren't being bullied, but often these kids are more sensitive, and you start picking up in the friendships that something is wrong in terms of, and that's how you pick up attentional difficulties. Okay, let's look at comorbidity. That's just a big word to say, what are symptoms that go with this? Usually a sense of worthlessness, a sense of I'm dumb, I'm stupid, okay, don't have any friends, and then definitely depression. Depression is very high in teenagers with attentional difficulties. Okay, so how do you diagnose it? One of the best ways to start a diagnosis is to take a child, if you are unsure and your teacher has spoken to you. I often find that parents come to me and say, I've taken the child to the OT. OT is an occupational therapist that works with bodily issues of movement and balance, etc. She's not going to help you or he in terms of attentional difficulties. So you have to take your child to an educational psychologist that will usually pick it up, or to a neurologist straight away. Okay. The thing is just sometimes if you go to a neurologist straight away, then the neurologist doesn't do all the other tests, the educational tests. So it's better to do holistic testing, and then you know where you need to go. Why is it good to diagnose it? Do we often overdiagnose? Overdiagnosis can come in when children are young. Okay, that's why I said don't put your child in school too early. If a child's 5.5 in grade 1, he's not going to be able to cope like the child that's 7. They are just too young, and then they look like they've got attentional difficulties, but they're babies. Okay, and there's a study that shows that. But also, if you don't identify it, I'll just wait and see. Maybe it will come right. Maybe they'll grow out of it. And if you leave it, then the issue becomes worse and worse and worse. Whereas if the child's small and you deal with it, it's so much easier to fix it. Within a year, they're fine, and you know where you're going. If you wait till they're 9 or 10 or 11, and now they're failing, you deal with all the other issues as well. Okay. And then the treatment. So I'm going to talk a little bit about treatment. There's a lot of therapy that you can do. There's a lot of homeopathic treatment that you can do that's more health-focused. For instance, your omega-3s, etc. But it doesn't always help. It depends how serious it is. Remember, I showed you in the brain that dopamine is not transferred or it's blocked. And if that is the issue, omegas is not going to help you. You have to look at something more. Okay. But like I said before, I'm not advocating either or. It depends on the child. Now, if you look at Ritalin, it's a methylphenidate. Is Ritalin and Concerta. This is what most of the kids are on. And this is a reuptake inhibitor. In other words, it goes and blocks that the vacuum cleaners don't, like I said before, don't reuptake the dopamine too quickly. So they're just across the synaptic space. I'm not going to repeat this. Then Adderall is amphetamine or dextroamphetamine. This is not available in South Africa, but it's the same kind of function that it does. It's interesting, though, that Adderall is also given for people that have narcolepsy. Narcolepsy is if you just fall asleep. You know, you just sit and not when you're tired at the desk. Okay, we all have that. But narcolepsy is literally a person looks at you and the next moment they're out. And they give Adderall to them, so it's a very strong stimulant. Okay. And then you get Strateria, which is mostly the most, some people say the most, which is atomoxetine, which is the most healthier, or the healthier version, but it still does more or less the same function in the brain. Okay, support. I think the main thing I want to get to, or not to get to round off with, is the idea that support must always be in a team. You can't fight this with the teacher. It's not the teacher's fault. The teacher can't fight this with the parents, not the parents' fault. It's not your fault. You have ADHD, that's why our son has ADHD. Okay, in a couple, you can't blame one another. It's something that's there. The leg is broken, fix it. Okay, it doesn't matter now how it broke. It's broken, fix it. And I often say to parents, you know, if you will break your leg, I'm not going to say to you, okay, now go run around the track. Let's fix your leg. No, run again. The same thing with a child with ADHD. You can't now say, I'm going to drill things into you that's going to fix it. It's not going to fix it. And why, if the leg's broken, why not just fix it? It's no problem. You will take medication if your head's aching. Okay, do something about it. Work in a team. That's the best way to do it. Don't be shy. Often parents will say, oh, my child's got attentional difficulties. No. Because if a child's got attentional difficulties, they're bright, they're innovative, they probably come up with the most amazing ideas at home on how to do things. You know, 10 to 1 when they leave school, they're going to be an excellent entrepreneur. They're not going to go and work for someone for a salary. They're going to make their own money. So celebrate the things that are good in attentional difficulties. But it starts with acknowledging that there is an issue. And I think that is the issue. Many parents are like, no, it will come right. It's fine. They'll grow out of it. They don't grow out of it. It just becomes worse. Acknowledge there's an issue and do something about it. That is the thing. Don't put your head in the sand. And maintain clear routines at home, like I said. Have order in and around the house. You know, sometimes I've walked into teachers' classrooms and it is a mess. Stuff's all over the place. And they're like, these kids are not concentrating. They're not focusing. Yeah, but look at your classroom. And the same thing at home. If you're that chaotic mom that's all over the place, how can you expect your child to be focused and structured? It starts with you. Clean your room first. Okay, Jordan Peterson wrote this whole book. He's a clinical psychologist in Canada. And he wrote this whole book, and the whole first chapter is about cleaning your room. He says if your space around you is not clean, how can you live a life that's focused in any way? Okay, so it's interesting. So they joke now. They say, oh, clean your room. But it's interesting. So have order. Maintain boundaries. You know, kids will always come and push the boundary. It doesn't matter if they are 5 or 25. They like to, let's just, you know, like that Jurassic Park movie where the velociraptors check the boundary just to check, is it still working? I don't know if they do. Okay, it's an old movie, never mind. Okay, but what they did, they tested the fence. Is the fence still working? Kids do that. It's not because they're evil. They just want to see. Is she going to budge a bit further today, you know? And then they're usually very upset if you don't budge, but they actually do respect you if you don't budge. Okay, you don't have to hit them to pieces by not budging. You just stand firm and say, no, sorry. And usually one parent tends to be a little bit more giving than the other one. So they also learn quickly, who am I going to go to? You know, we've got a little pug, and she knows I'm the one that gives food at the dinner table. So she doesn't even go to the others. She comes, sits by me immediately, you know, because she knows I'm the more one that might give her something. And this is kids, so they quickly learn, okay, I'm going to ask mom and tell dad, and ask dad and tell mom, you know. So, and that's why it's also, as a couple, you must be a united front. It sounds like war, but it's not. It's like just, you know what you believe in terms of your parenthood, and then you can help your kids. Okay, and then don't go into emotional confluence. That means if they, and this is especially later on for adolescents, if the screaming matches start happening, or, oh, my life is so terrible, and I hate myself, and don't go with the child into that. And you get also emotional and get dragged into it. Say, no, come, let's see how we can fix it. You must be the one that stays positive, because they can't always. Okay. And then allow for time out. Children that have attentional difficulties need their own space. Don't always be on their case. Don't always be now you didn't do this, now you didn't. Leave them also sometimes. Let them time out. And physical activity is exceptionally important. And this is what's so sad. Many times at school, the children that struggle during art or sport, they have extra lessons. And this is the time where they actually should be playing, because usually that's the child that's the best at soccer. Now he can't go do soccer because he must now do maths. Okay, it's not right. Celebrate what they can do well, but also physical activity is good for everyone anyway. And then praise efforts, even if it's a small little thing that they've done right. Most of us carry harm and hurt into our adulthood from adults in various situations, teachers or whatever, that hurt us in certain ways, or parents, and made us think we're not good enough. So it's always good just to give that little bit of praise. Push that little bit of praise. Because you know what? Sometimes if you try to do something and somebody says, wow, this is good, you feel like doing it more. Okay, it's just normal. This is who we are as humans. Okay, is there an advantage? I'm going to finish up now. I think there are many examples of people that acknowledge they have attentional difficulties and have made great strides in life. Michael Phelps, one of the ones. There's, swimmer. Richard Branson from the Virgin Group, so many entrepreneurs. And this was interesting for me. JetBlue is one of the biggest airlines in the world. And this guy acknowledges that he has attentional difficulties. And he says having attention deficit disorder has some drawbacks. You're disorganized and moving from project to project. But the advantages are that you look at the world a little differently. And you just think outside the box. You think about things that people haven't really thought about before. And this is what we need in the 21st century. We're going into the fourth industrial revolution, and if you don't know what it is, go read up about it. We're soon going to have a really serious battle to keep up with the machines around us. But machines can't think innovatively. Okay. So our kids are getting ready for this. They are born for this. Okay. And then Einstein said, everybody is a genius, but if you judge a fish by its ability to climb a tree, it will live its whole life believing that it's stupid. So celebrate what your child can do well and try and get through the rest as well as you can. Okay. And that's it. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much, Dr. Rackput. That was so awesome. Can we give a round of applause again? Excellent. All right. So what we're going to do now is we're just going to take a little refresher, a little break for 5 minutes. And then after 5 minutes, we come back here, and then we carry on with the program for the day. All right. So just stretch your legs, use the loo for 5 minutes. Thank you.